Well, Bronco Nation, for the second year in a row, I have to start off my post-game review series with a loss. A loss to look at here by Boise State. And I wish I could say that it wasn't that big a deal. I wish that I could say that, this was a toss-up, that we kind of expected this. I wish I could come in here and tell you that I know how this happened, and I don't. I mean, there was always a chance that Boise State could lose. Only we're just over 50% favored by ESPN. Vegas had Oregon State favored slightly. I believe the spread was 3 points. So there was always a chance that Boise State could lose. But to come out and play the way they did against Oregon State, I mean, this isn't Alabama. This isn't Georgia. This isn't a top 25 team. This is not even who knows? Obviously, first half of the season, or first part of the season, first game of the season, Oregon State's played one game and beaten Boise State. Maybe this is an undefeated Beaver team. I doubt it, but maybe it is. Even if that's the case, it doesn't make this loss any better, because the way that Boise State came out and lost this game was not in a competitive manner. Boise State came out from the get-go with a senior starting quarterback, a senior running back, and an offensive line that returned every single starter from last season, plus some transfers, and could not move the ball at all. And worse than that, turned it over 3 times in the first half, leading to the senior quarterback, 4-year quarterback for Boise State, who I have talked about experience-wise as a junior, but still an experienced quarterback, 4-year player for Boise State, replaced by the freshman Taylor Green, and it was all downhill from there. I mean, Taylor Green obviously was able to make a bit of a comeback here for Boise State. Was able to score or lead scoring drives for 17 points. Had a chance to lead scoring drives for another 6 points on top of that, except for 2 missed field goals. So it could have been 23 points, but still would have been a loss. As soon as you have to pull your starting quarterback, Boise State's seen this before, obviously. 2005 versus Georgia, Jared Zabransky comes in, throws a bunch of picks, replaced in the first half by Taylor Tharp, and the game pretty much over from that point. There was a chance. It got exciting there a little bit, but Boise State fans, I think, looking at that game, as soon as Hank Bachmeier came out that way, we knew that this game was over, and it was just a slow, long grind to the finish line where everything that could go wrong went wrong. Even from before Boise State even kicked off, I knew this game was not going to be what we thought it should be, because like I said, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, starting with the broadcast crew. Oh my goodness, Beth Mowins, the worst broadcaster in all of sports, the voice of a garbage disposal. She is impossible to listen to. I literally had my game on mute, or at like 4 or 6 on the remote, like turned way down the whole game, because she has the worst voice in all of college football. It is so grating. Oh my goodness, it's like having your ears driven off with a chainsaw. Or not even that quick. So from the get-go, this was not a good game. And then Hank Bachmeier comes out, throws 2 interceptions, forced fumble. Not the way Boise State fans wanted the season to start. There's a lot to unpack here. I have promised myself, and I'm going to promise all of you, that I'm going to keep all these game reviews this season to 30 minutes or less. So we're already 4 minutes in, 26 minutes more to wrap this up. 30 minutes or less, and that's it. Last season, I was averaging about an hour plus, hour to hour and a half on these game reviews. Not going to do that this season, especially not on a loss. You don't want to hear me go on and on about Boise State, how they lost for an hour and a half. So let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the offense, the defense, the special teams. We're going to grade each of these positions, give a wave-top summary. We're not going to get as in the weeds we did last season. I will still throw a debrief, but we're going to do wave-top summaries here, offense, defense, special teams, look at what happened, key things that stood out, and then we'll look at the 3 keys to the game, my 3 keys to the game that I had for Boise State and how they performed against that, and some expectations for Boise State fans going forward. So let's get right into this. Obviously, offense. And I actually jumped right on. It's already past 1:30 in the morning, because I live on the central time zone. So it's already past 1:30 in the morning. Usually I would kind of do a little more advanced study here and grade these. I'm actually grading these in front of you right now. We're going to talk about the scores. We're going to talk about what happened, and we're going to grade it right here together. So offense, Hank Bachmeier, 4 of 8, 30 yards, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, replaced. Taylor Green comes in, 19 out of 29, 155 yards, an interception, 11 rushes for 102 yards, 2 touchdowns, a long of 74. Very, very explosive player, very athletic player. Could not figure out how to throw the ball today. Going deep almost every single play, underthrowing almost every single ball. Now, some of those plays were pass interference, and they were able to move the ball. Some of the plays were caught. There was a miraculous catch, pretty much, by Ashton Jeanty, who was wide open. If he'd thrown it onto him, it would have been a touchdown right away. He underthrew it. Jeanty managed to track back the ball, threw PI, caught the ball one-handed. So there were still some amazing moments in here. Taylor Green's 74-yard touchdown run. That was incredible. Some amazing moments here, but every single pass by Taylor Green was underthrown and eventually ended up being intercepted one of the last drives of the game for Boise State before Oregon State took the ball and pretty much drove out most of the rest of the clock here. So offense could not move the ball at all. We've already established that. Taylor Green comes in. Boise State looked a little bit better under him, but that's, people are talking about a quarterback controversy. Is there a quarterback controversy for Boise State? I don't think so. I think this is similar to that 2005 team that we just talked about. Jared Zabransky comes in, throws a bunch of picks, gets replaced by Taylor Tharp, and Taylor Tharp manages to score some points and the game ends. I don't think that this is a quarterback controversy. I think that the games that we have coming up on our schedule, I mean, we've got next New Mexico, UT Martin, and UTEP, give us some opportunities to test out some different players. But what we saw out of Taylor Green today is he's not ready right now. This is not a quarterback that can go out and win you the Mountain West. This is not a quarterback that can go out there and win you the games you need to win this season. Now, can Bachmeier do that? We don't even know. That's a question for certain. That is certainly something he has to answer. But I think you're going to see next game, I think you're going to see a fierce quarterback discussion. There's going to definitely be pressure on Bachmeier. But I think Bachmeier is going to be the guy that you see finish out the season. Remember, even that 2005 Boise State team, which also happened to lose to Oregon State, kind of a little side note there, but that 2005 Boise State team was able to come back and almost win the Mountain West Conference, win 9 games, go to a bowl game against a ranked opponent in Boston College. Obviously, they lost before going on doing amazing things the next season in that 2006 Fiesta Bowl, or 2007 Fiesta Bowl, 2006 season. I think we're going to see something similar this year. Boise State, offensively, terrible game, obviously. Offensive line looked absolutely terrible, especially in the run game. Couldn't run the ball at all. Taylor Green made Boise State have a positive rushing yards, 126 yards rushing, but Halani, 13 rushes for only 9 yards. Our most explosive running back. He can break tackles, but it's hard to break tackles when you have 3 guys hitting you at the same time because the offensive line hasn't blocked anybody. It's also hard to break tackles or to have any kind of maneuverability or explosiveness in the running game when you're running the ball up the middle every single time with almost no outside runs, no movement on the offensive line at all, no shifts, nothing. Just up the middle 3 times in a row in the first half, 3 times in a row. No yardage gain, punt the ball away. I had to blink. I actually put that on Twitter. I said, I need to blink right now because I think I'm watching the UCF game. I have resisted the criticism against Tim Plow, especially last season, because I think it's unfair to criticize any coach in their first season, especially moving up to the FBS. And they're not having their players. But this is a full off season, and this is still what we're seeing. We're going to need to see something dramatic from Tim Plow going forward this season to show that he's offensive coordinator for Boise State. Because what we saw today, yes, his quarterback was having issues. I mean, Hank Bachmeier threw a bunch of picks that he shouldn't have thrown into double coverage, underthrown. We talk about Taylor Green underthrowing. The first pick, Hank Bachmeier threw, the wide receiver was open, not super open, 2 defenders, one underneath, one at the top. But there was a window there. Completely underthrown. If he'd overthrown it, it probably would have been incomplete. Completely underthrown and interception. So there's a lot of responsibility lies on Hank Bachmeier, and then you get thrown in a freshman running a quarterback that you definitely were not expecting to see, and nobody foresaw Taylor Green taking over from Hank Bachmeier in this game. So you have to throw Taylor Green in, and then obviously there's a bunch of other issues that happen along the rest of the game. Your offensive line can't block. So it's not all on Tim Plow. It's definitely not all on Tim Plow. This was a team loss for sure. But the play calling that we did see from Tim Plow was questionable, highly questionable. And there was no explosiveness. There was no razzle-dazzle. I mean, one of my keys to the game was razzle-dazzle, and we can kind of talk about that right now. No razzle-dazzle from Boise State. Oregon State threw a wide receiver pass for almost a touchdown. Boise State, nothing. I mean, Oregon State was more Boise State today than Boise State was. So there was no there was no lucidity, there was no explosiveness, there was no creativity from the offense. I mean, nobody was getting open because everything was so simple. And sure, they toned it down for Taylor Green, but even before that, nobody was really getting open because the routes were so simple. The route tree was so limited. You just weren't, a route tree was so limited, you just weren't seeing anything out of this offense. So for the offense, I think we can fairly grade them as a D. I think that's a fair grade on them. I'm not going to give them an F because they were able to put up 17 points. Taylor Green had some explosive moments, but I think we can fairly grade them here as a D, possibly pushing towards a D minus. Holani wasn't able to do anything. The offensive line was terrible. They did seem to be blocking slightly better in the passing game, but there still wasn't a ton of time. Taylor Green was able to find some more time with his shiftiness and the maneuverability and stepping up into the pocket. So I will say under Taylor Green, they looked like they were blocking better than under Hank Bachmeier. So maybe that's another reflection on Hank Bachmeier. But Taylor Green, the reason I'm saying this is not a quarterback controversy is because he just doesn't have the arm right now. He doesn't have the arm development. He has some arm power there. I mean, he's able to pretty effortlessly throw the ball. But his ball placement right now is not at starting quarterback level. It's not QB1. So Boise State has a decision here. Do they want to build for the future and make this a practice year where maybe Boise State doesn't even get bowl eligible so that we get Taylor Green prepped up for the future? Or do we want to play for this season while also prepping Taylor Green? I think you can do that. You can give him the snaps in practice. You can get him on the field in some specific moments without having to sacrifice the entire season. And I think Hank Bachmeier is going to come back stronger from this. I definitely do. I don't think that Hank Bachmeier is living up to his potential. I don't know if he will this season after a start like that. But as we should all remember, Jared Zabrensky, of course, it took him a year, but was amazing the season afterwards. So maybe Hank Bachmeier can do that a little bit faster and get better this season. And Jared Zabrensky had some good moments in that 2005 season as well. So grading the offense, we've kind of talked about, I mean, you could go nitty gritty and talk about all the little things. Only six players caught passes today. Only 3 of those were wide receivers. Only 1 tight end involved in the receiving game. That's terrible. We didn't see anything out of Tano Hopper. I was so infuriated by that because I think he's one of the best playmakers on this team. We didn't see him at all. We didn't see Kurt Rafto catch any passes. Halani Barrett was targeted early, but there weren't a lot of opportunities. The running backs were not used effectively in the passing game, and the tight ends specifically were not used effectively. I'll take that back. The running backs were targeted. I will say the running backs were targeted, especially Taylor Green. He kind of leaned on Halani as a cushion for him. But the tight ends were not used effectively at all. Riley Smith got some opportunities. I think he had 4 catches, something like that. Riley Smith was used effectively, but the tight ends as a whole were not used effectively in this offense, and we didn't really see any wide receivers stepping up. I said that would happen. I said the wide receiver room was untested. Lean on the tight ends. We didn't see that happen today. So when we get to that key, that's going to be a big F for Boise State. All right, defense. Defense was a highlight for Boise State this game. It certainly was. Defense was a highlight for Boise State, not in the passing game. But if there was a true positive to pull from Boise State, it was its ability, at least for the first 3 quarters, to stop the run game and the short passing game. Specifically, coming from the nickel position, Tyreek Jones in the nickel looked amazing. He did a great job stopping those short passes and the run game short there. Skinner, of course, coming up. I thought the D-line overall played very well. 4th, a little bit of a breakdown, but at that point, you are so worn out. You're on the field so much. And as a defensive player, I mean, I've been there, not at the collegiate level, but I did play defensive line. And when you are out there and you are just dragged down play after play after play, and your offense is doing nothing, I mean, it starts to wear on you mentally a little bit as well as physically. So the defensive line letting up in the 4th does not reflect poorly on them. Reflects a little bit on them, obviously, but does not reflect as poorly on them as it might otherwise. I thought that they played great overall. So stopping the run was fantastic. They did allow 178 yards rushing, but a lot of that came in the 4th quarter. Great job of pressuring the quarterback. Didn't sack him. I'm not going to confirm that right now because ESPN is really late getting their stats out. So I wasn't able to go and actually confirm that the defense didn't get any sacks. But from watching, and I went through all of the plays, and I didn't list any, and I didn't see any. So I don't believe we got a sack today, which is really bad. That says a lot to not be able to get a sack. However, Boise State was getting the quarterback quicker. Even though they weren't sacking them, they were pressuring him and making him have to adjust his footing, adjust his positioning. They were doing that a lot better this season early on than they did last season early on. So I thought that was an improvement. Obviously, you want to see some sacks out of that. Two interceptions, though. Two interceptions. Interception by J.L. Skinner, and then also an interception by Caleb Biggers. So both of those great plays, and a fumble recovery as well by the defense. So some real highlight moments. The biggest letdown by the defense was obviously against the passing game. 292 yards allowed through the air, specifically targeting Kaniho early on. He came in as kind of the replacement there when Markel Reed got carted off. That's something I didn't actually talk about, was Austin Bolt carted off. So we'll have to see how that impacts the season. But Markel Reed carted off, injury, hopefully not long-term, injured last season. So hopefully not a re-injury, something like that, because the secondary I thought was going to have a lot of depth, but they did not look as deep as they should have, because Kaniho definitely was targeted and gave up a lot of deep passes in that first half. I did not see a lot out of Tyreek LaBeouf. I thought he would come in to replace Kaniho, especially with the issues that we were having in the secondary. So I think there were some issues in that secondary that need to be resolved as well. So the passing game, the defense against the passing game, not very effective today. Getting better throughout the game as Boise State was able to put a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. But when he had time to throw, the receivers were open, and he had opportunities to get the ball downfield to them. But like I said, some positives here out of the defense. I'm going to give them a solid B performance here. I'm not going to give them a B plus because of the issues against the receiving game, getting really worn down there in the fourth quarter, which again, I think a lot more of that's mental than it is physical. But getting worn down in the fourth quarter, I mean, they just gave up so many runs in that second to last drive there for Oregon State. 5 minutes and 14 seconds just drained off the clock, took away any possibility of a comeback here, even though the possibility was still slim to begin with. And then, of course, giving up a long touchdown run as well prior to that 32-yard rushing touchdown, or 30-something long touchdown rushing there in the fourth quarter. So defense, I thought, performed well overall. I thought that they were a strength of this team. They kept Boise State in it. They kept the score from being outrageous. Obviously, final score here being 17-34. They kept that from being 42 or more, or something really egregious here by Oregon State. So they kept Boise State respectable, even though I wouldn't say this was a respectable loss with the way that Boise State lost it. But they kept the score, for people just looking at the score, from saying, okay, you got absolutely destroyed. You got beat, you got crushed, but you didn't get blown out. And I think that is due to the defense. So we're going to give them a solid B here. All right, 17 minutes in, halfway through. Let's get on with this here, talking about the special teams. I thought this was going to be a strength of the team. I was so, of everything that didn't make sense to me. I mean, you have a senior starting quarterback who comes out and plays the way he did. That didn't make sense to me. You have an offensive line with so much experience that, it was terrible last year, but they've had a full year to train on it. They've got all these guys back. They bring in their transfers. I thought they'd be improved. Them performing as badly as they didn't make sense to me. Halani being as ineffective as he was, even though the offensive line wasn't there, he was something he was able to make up for last season, and he just wasn't effective this game. And again, I don't think that's his fault, but that didn't make sense to me. The play calling didn't make sense to me. But what didn't make sense to me the most out of this entire game is that your kicker, one of the best kickers in the country, and certainly in the Mountain West, an award, a preseason award, watch list member, misses 2 less than 35-yard field goals at the end of the first half and at the end of the second half. Now, in the grand scheme of things, 34-17 point loss, it wouldn't have done anything. You would still have lost the game. But that is troubling. That is deeply concerning. I've talked about how good Dalmez is. I do. I believe that he's one of the best, or has the potential to prove himself to be one of the best field goal kickers in Boise State history. And I think that what he's done so far puts him in the numbers for being one of the best field goal kickers in Boise State history. But I've also said that he hasn't had an opportunity, or he hasn't risen to an opportunity to win a game through his kicking. He's done a great job, put up a bunch of field goals, done a great job in accuracy as far as the ones he's missed, the ones he's made, but he also hasn't won a game. He obviously, against Oklahoma State, that field goal was blocked. It was too low, and getting blocked. And now, with some pressure on him, I mean, no one's scoring. They're looking to you to score, not able to score the field goal. I don't know if that's symptomatic of just the team being in a funk overall, or if that is symptomatic, or if that is representative of Dalmez maybe not being a kicker who, when the chips are down, is able to go out and make kicks. I really don't want to think that of Dalmez, and I'm not going to. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here. But it's certainly something that Boise State fans should keep an eye on. And it sucks as Boise State fans to not be able to say our kicker is solid because we're so used to not being able to say that. And it really felt like with Dalmas, we could say, okay, we can worry about everything else on the team. We can worry about the quarterback. We can worry about the offensive line. We can worry about the defense. But at least when we come out to kick a field goal, we know we're getting 3. Well, now we have to worry again. And that is just another drag down from this game that now we have to think about the kicking game. I don't remember who said it, but it was a famous coach once said that the best special teams is one that you don't have to think about because you just know they're going to go out and do their job every time. It's a non-factor. If you're having to think about the special teams at all, that means something bad is happening. And it wasn't just the kicking game. Ferguson, the Aussie kicker coming in, I had high expectations for him. Not a great start for him. 5 kicks, average of 37.4 yards, long of 45, almost had one blocked, had a short punt from the end zone, and also had another short punt after that as well. Nothing super explosive, nothing exciting. 37.4 yard average is not great. You want to see certainly plus 40 at the minimum. So that was disappointing overall. The field position battle was certainly won by Oregon State in this one, in a large part because of Ferguson's first game here for Boise State. Now, obviously, it's his first game for Boise State. Hopefully, he can learn from this and build and grow and move on. But that was disappointing. And then just overall, I mean, the special teams performance overall, I mean, Cobbs muffs a kick return, picks it up, but muffs a kick return. Boise State ends up starting at the 10. Boise State averaged 17 yards per kick return. That was between Cobbs, Nash, and Gentry. No punt returns at all. He looked uncertain catching them. He caught a punt inside of the 10 versus letting it bounce. And seeing the coaches always say, don't put your heels inside the 10, especially not the 5, but most coaches will also say 10. And he caught a punt at about the 7 or 8 yard line that might have been able to bounce into the end zone. At the very worst, would probably have trickled back a little bit. So caught a punt inside the 10. And then when the coaches talked to him, you saw a couple punts later, or maybe it was the next punt, you saw the coaches talk to him. The ball was coming inside the 10. He didn't go for it, but he also didn't move out of the way. He just stood there like this until the punt had hit and had started to roll. I mean, at some point, you got to move out of the way. That punt was rolling back towards him. The Oregon State players ended up falling on it. But I believe if they'd let that punt go, it would have hit him in the back of the heels because he was just standing there for like 7 seconds. And it would have hit him back in the back of the heels and been a turnover. And that could happen later on in the season. So definitely some things to work with here for special teams. I have never done this since Dalmas has been on the team. I think since I've started doing the videos here for Boise State. I've never done this, but I'm going to give the special teams an F because this was an abysmal performance. Dalmas did make 1 field goal from 41 yards. I mean, there weren't any blocked field goals on Boise State's or punts on Boise State side, so that's a good thing. But there was nothing exciting. There were missed field goals in could have been important opportunities and definitely in high stress level opportunities, and the field position battle was absolutely lost by Boise State. So unfortunately, I'm going to give this an F. So D- by offense, or D to D- on offense, B for the defense, and then an F for the special teams. That wraps up the review of the 3 phases of the game there, offense, defense, and special teams. Let's talk real quick here about 3 keys to the game before we kind of wrap up and look ahead to the next week and the rest of the season here for Boise State. So first key, and we'll just do this real quick. First key was keep up the tempo. I thought Boise State did pretty well on this overall. End of the first half, Taylor Green, the offense, maybe they were tired. They didn't get to the line quickly. They lost about 20 seconds there. That ran off the clock. Ended up having 11 seconds left in the first half through basically one throw towards the end zone that had to kick a field goal. Whereas if they'd been quick about it, they could have maybe gotten 2 plays in and maybe scored a touchdown there. And maybe that would have changed the momentum and gotten Boise State back into this earlier on, and maybe they could have won the game. I mean, that's a lot of could-haves. But the main point is that that's not a good situation to be there in 1 minute drill, a 2-minute drill, and not be rushing back to the line. So Boise State, overall, I thought they kept the tempo up really well and were much better, much more effective this week or this game than they were last season at making sure they kept tempo up throughout the game. So I'm going to give them an A- because of the missed opportunities throughout parts of the game. But overall, I thought that this key was pretty well met, and I like that they were pushing that up-tempo attack by Boise State. Second here, lean on the tight ends. Obviously, they were going to Riley Smith, but they didn't emphasize any of the other tight ends. I've already talked about this in depth, but you should have seen every tight end get a reception, I believe. You should have seen every tight end get a reception. You should have seen Hopper, for certain, out there being targeted on the deep ball. He was barely on the field He was barely on the field today. One of your best blocking tight ends, as the coaches have said, and also one of your best receiving tight ends. Led the tight ends in receiving last season, had 2 deep touchdown passes, had one of the most impressive touchdowns I saw last season against Colorado State on a deep ball. He is a threat. He was not on the field. This is an absolute failure by the Boise State offense not to emphasize the tight ends in this game, so we're going to give this one an F. Last one here, bring out the razzle dazzle. Didn't see anything of it. It was the most simple playbook I'd ever seen by Boise State. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily ever seen, but it was one of the most simple playbooks I've ever seen by Boise State. Runs up the middle, deep passes, no complex route trees, no mixing things up, barely any shifts, not involving the tight ends really throughout the game, and certainly not actually going out and making special plays here, trick plays for Boise State. Oregon State did, but not Boise State. So we're going to give this an F as well. So 5 minutes left. I'm actually pretty good here on time. I'm happy with myself on that. At least I'm winning on one thing today. So this was a big disappointment, obviously, right off the bat. And obviously it pretty much knocks us out of New Year's Six contention unless Oregon State goes and undefeated and wins the Pac-12. But I don't think that was ever an option this season. If you saw my preseason predictions, which I did with Master Football, I was calling a 10-2 season for Boise State. Now I will say, if Boise State plays the way they did today, this is not going to be a 10-2 season. This is going to be a much worse season than that because Oregon State was a good team, but there's some teams I think that are going to be better. Fresno State coming up is going to be very tough. San Diego State lost to Arizona. They might not be as tough. BYU is going to be very tough. That's going to be another loss probably if Boise State plays the way they did. It's later on in the season. They have more time to adjust for it. But that's probably going to be a loss. So Boise State needs to play much better. But I also was never predicting a New Year's Six Bowl for Boise State. What I was predicting for Boise State this season was improvement. Now, this game was not improvement, but it's also a first game against a good team here from the Pac-12 who is improving and who a lot of people are seeing as a dark horse for the Pac-12 championship. So, a Oregon State team that is on the rise. Boise State can still go out and accomplish their goals. They can go out and they can win most of their non-conference games. I think that game against BYU is going to be very tough unless we see something very dramatic change. And I wanted them to go out and win a Mountain West Championship game. I think that was the biggest goal here for Boise State, is being able to go out and compete for that. But more than anything, I just wanted Boise State to show improvement, to get to something more than that 7-5, to shoot for a 9-win season. Boise State, when they opened up against Oregon in 2005 with a similar performance, worse performance, they still were able to get to that 9-win season. The Mountain West is in a bit, it looks like they're going to be in a bit of a down year this season. The Mountain West has not played well so far in its non-conference schedule. Nevada barely winning against New Mexico State. Utah State barely winning against UConn. San Diego State losing to Arizona. Teams struggling as FCS teams, not Air Force. Air Force did a great job winning, but other teams struggling as FCS teams. Wyoming barely beating Tulsa today and getting destroyed by Illinois. It's just not looking like a great season here for the Mountain West. Now, it could, we don't know. It could be better than it is. There could be some changes down the road that these teams that they're playing earlier on are actually better than they look, and the Mountain West is actually going to be good. But there's going to be some opportunities, it looks like. Some of these teams on the schedule that look like they're going to be really good might not be quite as good, give some opportunities for Boise State. There's also a great stretch here. The next 3 games, New Mexico, UT Martin, and UTEP, where Boise State can adjust and find itself, whether that means going with Taylor Green, which I don't think is going to happen, and developing him, getting him ready for the Mountain West Conference schedule, or getting Hank Bachmeier back into fighting shape and moving forward with this season. This is a great bit here. I wish that Oregon State had been our 3rd or 4th game and that we'd had these earlier games early on to test and find out and get the team together and find out who those wide receivers were going to be and find out who your backups at DB were going to be apparently, and be able to find some depth on this roster and be able to just meld the first string in the first place before you move forward. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But Boise State now has a chance to do that. Starting off 0-1, next week, a chance to get back to 1-0. Season starts over, chance to get back to 1-0, take a win against New Mexico, and move on with the season. Boise State fans, we should be disappointed by this game. We should ask questions. We should question why this happened, and Boise State should be accountable to its fans. But at the end of the day, Boise State's goals are still achievable. This team, I think, will get better as the season moves on, and we shouldn't give up on them yet. There's still more to come. As Jeremiah Dickey always says, Hashtag what's next. I think the future is going to be brighter than what we're looking at right now. Maybe 10-win seasons off the table, but I still think an 8 or 9-win season is still there. Boise State fans still got a lot to hope for this year. Let's be there behind and support them. Thanks so much for watching. As always, go Big Blue!